You deliberately apply thermal radiation to deceased animal tissue. For pleasure? Katix's facial tentacles writhed in what their human host had learned to recognize as profound confusion. Marcus wiped his hands on his Kiss the Pitmaster apron and tried not to laugh at the Terran diplomat's obvious distress. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds kind of weird. But trust me, there's an art to it. An art to burning deceased flesh? The alien's bioluminescent spots flickered in what might have been concern or possibly mild nausea. It was hard to tell with Zentarans. Their color-based emotional displays weren't exactly intuitive to humans. We call it barbecue, Marcus explained patiently. And it's not just burning meat. It's a slow process of smoking and cooking that transforms tough cuts into something amazing. He lifted the lid of his prized offset smoker, releasing a cloud of fragrant hickory smoke into the crisp autumn air. Katix recoiled slightly, their crystalline exoskeleton catching the afternoon sunlight. The amount of resources you expend on this process is considerable. 12 Earth hours for a single piece of meat? 15, actually. This baby's been going since 3 a.m. Marcus gestured proudly to the massive beef brisket that had been slowly rendering under his careful attention. And don't even get me started on the week I spent perfecting my dry rub recipe. The Zentarans' universal translator made a sound that might have been a gulp. Your species continues to perplex me, Marcus Thompson. You have matter replicators that can produce perfectly adequate nutrition in seconds, yet you choose to spend multiple solar cycles manually applying heat to animal protein? Look, Marcus said, checking his temperature probe for the 100th time that day. I get that it seems inefficient, but there's something about doing things the old-fashioned way, you know? Plus, replicator food just doesn't have the same... He waved his hands, searching for the right words. Soul to it. Soul? Katix's translator crackled with confusion. You attribute metaphysical properties to cooked protein? Marcus couldn't help but chuckle. It's more about the process, the dedication, the way the smoke ring forms, how the fat renders down and makes everything juicy and tender. Here. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his camera roll. Check out this time-lapse I took of my last cook. See how the bark develops? The alien leaned forward, multiple eyes focusing on the screen with scientific curiosity. The exterior does undergo a fascinating transformation. The chemical reactions appear quite complex. That's what I'm talking about, and every piece of meat is different. You've got to learn to read it, adjust your technique. Sometimes I'll stay up all night monitoring the temperature, making tiny adjustments to the vents. You deprive yourself of sleep cycle to observe this process? Katix's spots shifted to a deep purple that Marcus had never seen before. Some things are worth losing sleep over. Marcus checked his watch. Speaking of which, this baby should be just about done. Wanna be my guinea pig? The alien's translator took a moment with that one. I do not understand the reference to Earth rodents, but I believe you are inviting me to sample the results of your labor? Exactly. Marcus pulled on his heavy-duty gloves and carefully removed the brisket, wrapped in butcher paper and perfectly probed tender. Just let it rest for about an hour, then you'll see what all the fuss is about. Katix's spots cycled through several colors in rapid succession. I must admit, the aroma compounds being released are intriguing. Our analytical systems detected over 200 distinct chemical signatures during the cooking process. Only 200? Marcus grinned. Must be losing my touch. The next hour was spent with Katix peppered Marcus with increasingly technical questions about wood selection, temperature gradients, and the Maillard reaction, while Marcus did his best to explain that sometimes you just had to go by feel. Finally, it was time. Marcus unwrapped the brisket with the reverence of a priest unveiling a sacred artifact. The bark was perfect, dark and crusty on the outside, while the meat itself was juicy and tender enough to cut with the side of a fork. The moment of truth, Marcus said, slicing off a piece from the flat end and offering it to his alien guest. Just try not to analyze it too much, okay? Sometimes you've got to turn off the scientific instruments and just experience something. Katix delicately accepted the morsel with one of their smaller manipulator appendages. Their species didn't have anything analogous to a human mouth, but rather absorbed nutrients through specialized membranes. Marcus watched nervously as the piece of brisket was pressed against one such membrane and began to dissolve. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Katix's spots began to pulse with a brilliant golden light that Marcus had never seen before. This is... The translator crackled and popped, apparently struggling to convey the alien's response. The complexity of flavors, the textural interplay, The way the proteins have denatured to create entirely new compound structures. They paused. I believe I understand now why your species would devote such resources to this process. Marcus beamed. Want another piece? Please. Katix's spots were still glowing gold. And perhaps you could explain this dry rub process in more detail. For purely scientific purposes, of course. Of course, Marcus agreed, trying to hide his smile as he cut another slice. Though I should warn you, my rub recipe is a closely guarded secret, classified at the highest levels of human-alien relations. Understandable, Katix said solemnly, though their spots flickered with what might have been amusement. Though I feel compelled to point out that our scanning technology could easily determine its chemical composition. You could, Marcus agreed. But then you'd miss out on the most important ingredient. Which is? The satisfaction of figuring it out yourself through good old-fashioned trial and error. Trust me, the mistakes are half the fun. Katix absorbed another piece of brisket, their spots swirling with new patterns. Your species' approach to culinary arts is inefficient, time-consuming, and relies heavily on subjective measurements and gut feelings, rather than precise scientific methodology. But, Marcus prompted, but I believe I would like to learn more. Katix's translator hesitated. Would you be willing to mentor me in these techniques? Marcus grinned. Katix, my friend, welcome to the wonderful world of barbecue. Fair warning, though, once you start down this path, there's no going back. Next thing you know, you'll be staying up all night adjusting vents and arguing about wood choices on internet forums. I accept these risks, Katix said solemnly, though their spots danced with excitement. Though I must ask, what is an internet forum and why would one argue about combustible organic material there? Marcus laughed and cut another slice of brisket. Oh boy, we've got a lot to cover. Let's start with the basics. Have you ever heard of something called a smoke ring? As Marcus launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the chemistry behind pink smoke rings, he couldn't help but smile. Sure, humans might not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but they had something better. The patience and passion to transform simple ingredients into something magical, one long smoke session at a time. Katix listened intently, their spots pulsing with curiosity and what Marcus could have sworn was growing enthusiasm. Maybe this was how humanity would finally make its mark on the galactic stage. Not through technological achievements or military might, but through the universal language of really good barbecue. And if that meant spending the next few weekends teaching a crystalline alien the finer points of brisket trimming and fire management, well, there were worse ways to advance human-alien relations. Besides, Marcus thought as he watched Katix carefully absorb another piece of brisket, their spots glowing with pure joy. Maybe the galaxy could use a little more barbecue diplomacy. The end of that afternoon found them still sitting by the smoker, trading stories and techniques. Katix explaining their species' traditional nutrient preparation methods while Marcus shared tales of barbecue competitions and family recipes. It turned out that while their approaches to food might be different, the joy of sharing a meal transcended species. And if anyone found it strange to see a human and a crystalline alien bonding over smoked meat in a suburban backyard, well, that was just another day in humanity's ongoing mission to share their particular brand of culinary chaos with the galaxy at large. After all, some things were universal, like the satisfaction of a perfectly smoked brisket and the friendships forged over good food. Even if one party had tentacles and absorbed their portion through specialized membranes. You know, Katix said as the sun began to set, their spots still glowing with that peculiar golden light. I believe I owe you an apology, Marcus Thompson. Oh? Yes. I initially thought this practice was primitive and inefficient. Their spots swirled thoughtfully. I now understand that it is merely charmingly human, and perhaps that is precisely what makes it valuable. Marcus smiled and fired up the smoker again. Want to learn how to do a pork shoulder next? Katix's spots blazed with enthusiasm. I thought you'd never ask. And so began the great galactic barbecue revolution of 2157, one smoke ring at a time. 3 months later, Marcus's backyard had become something of an interstellar cultural hub. The original smoker had been joined by 2 more, each modified with Katix's surprisingly helpful suggestions for temperature control and smoke distribution. The Zentaran diplomat had proven to be an exceptionally quick study, their analytical mind perfectly suited to the precise aspects of smoking meat while gradually learning to appreciate the more intuitive elements. Your thermal distribution modifications have increased efficiency by 23.7%, Katix noted one morning. their spots shifting through proud shades of blue as they monitored their first solo brisket cook. Though I must admit, I still don't fully understand why you insist that cooking at night produces superior results. Marcus sipped his coffee and grinned. Some mysteries of barbecue aren't meant to be solved, my friend. Sometimes the magic is in not knowing exactly why it works. Highly illogical, K-Tix responded, their spots flickering with what Marcus had learned to recognize as fondness. Yet I find myself unable to dispute the empirical evidence. The nocturnal cooking sessions do seem to yield superior results. Word had spread through the diplomatic community about the curious human tradition that had so captivated one of the galaxy's most analytically minded species. Soon, Marcus's weekend cooks had attracted an eclectic group of alien diplomats and researchers, each bringing their own unique perspective to the art of barbecue. The Hadraxians, with their highly developed sense of chemical analysis, had become particularly fascinated by the wood selection process. Their contribution of a specialized scanner that could detect optimal moisture content in smoking woods had been a game-changer, though Marcus insisted on still using the traditional snap test alongside it. The scanner indicates this hickory specimen has achieved optimal combustion parameters, announced Zixtel, a Hadraxian researcher who had become a regular at these gatherings. Their crystalline antennae vibrated with excitement as they held up a piece of wood. Marcus took the piece and bent it, listening to the snap. Numbers are good, but the snap is perfect. This one's going in the firebox. Even the normally stoic Valerian delegation had been drawn into the enthusiasm, their initial skepticism about primitive thermal application techniques, giving way to intense debates about smoke ring formation and the physics of bark development. K-Tix had taken to documenting everything, creating what they called a scientific analysis of human culinary tradition, focus on prolonged thermal application to protein structures. The document had grown to over 1,000 pages, complete with molecular diagrams, thermal imaging data, and, somewhat surprisingly, a section titled, The Indefinable Variables, Accepting the Role of Human Intuition in Optimal Results. I've been invited to present our findings at the Galactic Culinary Sciences Symposium, K-Tix announced one evening, their spots swirling with nervous excitement. The committee was particularly interested in our research on the relationship between atmospheric pressure and bark formation. Marcus nearly dropped his temperature probe. Our research? I just showed you how my granddad taught me to smoke meat. Precisely. K-Tix's spots pulsed enthusiastically. The integration of generational knowledge transfer with empirical observation, it's revolutionary. Did you know that your method of checking for doneness by feel actually corresponds to highly specific protein degradation patterns? We've been able to map the entire process. The symposium presentation was a sensation. K-Tix had brought along one of Marcus's briskets, carefully maintained at optimal temperature in a stasis field, and the attending delegates had been amazed by both the scientific analysis and the actual results. Videos of various alien species experiencing barbecue for the first time went viral across both human and alien social networks. The unexpected cultural exchange had effects far beyond the culinary world. Trade negotiations became noticeably smoother when conducted over plates of perfectly smoked beef. Diplomatic tensions eased as representatives found common ground in discussions of smoke patterns and meat preparation techniques. A Hadraxian cultural attaché was overheard remarking that it was significantly more challenging to maintain interstellar conflict while sharing expertly prepared protein structures. Back in Marcus's backyard, K-Tix was preparing for their biggest challenge yet, teaching a workshop on barbecue basics to a group of newly arrived alien diplomats. Remember, Marcus coached, watching his former student adjust the vents with practiced precision. It's not just about the numbers. You've got to help them feel the magic. K-Tix's spots shifted to that now familiar golden glow. Indeed, as your species says, the smoke must flow through you. I don't think that's actually a saying. It is now, K-Tix replied, their spots twinkling with mischief. I included it in Chapter 7 of my research paper. It has been cited 16 times already. Marcus laughed and shook his head. The galaxy, it seemed, had developed a taste for barbecue, and there was no going back. Humanity's contribution to interstellar culture might not have been the most technologically advanced, but it had proven to be among the most influential. As he watched K-Tix expertly explain the importance of temperature control to a fascinated group of alien diplomats, Marcus couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best way to bridge the gap between worlds wasn't through grand technological achievements or complex diplomatic protocols, but through the simple, timeless art of cooking good food and sharing it with friends. even if those friends happened to be crystalline aliens who absorbed their meals through specialized membranes. The smoke rose into the evening air, carrying with it the promise of understanding, fellowship, and perfectly rendered fat. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other smokers were being fired up, other techniques being shared, other bonds being formed over the universal language of barbecue. Humanity had finally found its galactic niche, and it smelled absolutely delicious. "Marcus," Cadix called, their spots pulsing with urgency. "I believe we need your expertise. There appears to be some debate about the proper timing for spritzing." "Coming!" Marcus grabbed his spray bottle and headed over to the group. After all, proper barbecue technique waited for no one, regardless of their species or planetary origin. The great galactic barbecue revolution continued to spread, one perfectly smoked piece of meat at a time. And if anyone thought it strange that humanity's most significant contribution to interstellar society came in the form of carefully controlled fire and smoke, well, they probably hadn't tried the brisket yet. The Galactic Council's annual Cultural Exchange Summit wasn't usually the most exciting event in the diplomatic calendar. Most years, it was a fairly staid affair filled with formal presentations on various species' artistic achievements and technological innovations. But this year was different. "I still can't believe we're doing this," Marcus muttered, adjusting the temperature on the massive modified smoker that now occupied a significant portion of the Council's central gathering space. The unit, a collaboration between human craftsmanship and Zentaran engineering, was capable of smoking enough meat to feed several hundred beings of various species. "The data doesn't lie," Katix responded, their spots gleaming with professional satisfaction. "Since the introduction of what we're calling the Barbecue Diplomatic Initiative, interspecies cooperation has increased by 47%, while conflict resolution timeframes have decreased by 32%. Plus," added Zixtal, the Hadraxian researcher who had become their regular collaborator, "the chemical signatures produced by your smoking process have been shown to trigger pleasure responses in 94% of known sentient species. Even those who don't consume solid matter find the aromatic experience compelling." The summit's organizing committee had been skeptical at first about dedicating prime presentation space to what one member had dismissed as primitive thermal protein modification. That skepticism had lasted exactly as long as it took for Katix to distribute samples from their personal stash of Marcus's teaching briskets. Now, the Earth BBQ Symposium was the most anticipated event of the summit. Delegates from across the galaxy had signed up for hands-on workshops in fire management, meat preparation, and the all-important art of patience. "The Arcturians are particularly excited," Katix noted, their spots shifting through patterns that indicated both amusement and mild concern. "Though we may need to explain again why they can't accelerate the process using their natural plasma generation abilities." Marcus winced, remembering the incident during the test run where an over-enthusiastic Arcturian had attempted to apply their species' signature plasma touch to speed up the cooking process. The resulting explosion had been spectacular, though thankfully contained by the safety fields Katix had insisted on installing. "At least the Hive Mind Collective has gotten the hang of it," Marcus observed, watching a group of interconnected crystalline beings delicately adjusting the vents on their assigned smoker. "Who knew they'd have such a knack for maintaining consistent temperatures?" "We are many, we are one, we are maintaining optimal thermal conditions," the collective intoned in perfect unison, their crystalline forms glowing with pride as they monitored their first brisket. The impact of barbecue on galactic culture had been both profound and unexpected. The Zentaran Science Academy had created an entire new department dedicated to the study of what they termed terrestrial thermal-chemical protein enhancement methodologies. The Hadraxians had begun experimenting with growing Earth hardwoods in their atmospheric domes, leading to fascinating new hybrids with unique smoking properties. Even the notoriously standoffish quantum beings, who existed partially in other dimensions, had developed an interest after discovering that the smoke patterns created by properly managed fires created aesthetically pleasing perturbations in the space-time continuum. But perhaps the most significant change had been in the way different species interacted. There was something about the long hours tending a smoker that broke down barriers and encouraged communication. It was hard to maintain species prejudices when you were sharing techniques and trading tips about fire management. "I've been analyzing the social dynamics," Katix commented, their spots shifting through analytical patterns. "The average time spent in what humans call shooting the breeze during a smoking session is approximately 67% of the total cook time. The remaining 33% is split between actual fire management and what you call fussing over nothing." Marcus grinned. And how exactly did you quantify fussing over nothing? That proved challenging, Katix admitted, their spots flickering with what might have been embarrassment. Human behavior patterns don't always conform to standard analytical frameworks. The conversation was interrupted by an excited trill from the Melodian delegation, a species that communicated primarily through musical tones. They had just achieved their first perfect smoke ring, and were expressing their joy in a complex harmonic arrangement that was rapidly being picked up and repeated by other Melodians across the gathering space. Now that's what I call a barbecue anthem, Marcus laughed as the musical celebration spread. Indeed, Katix agreed, their spots pulsing in time with the Melodian harmonies. Though I believe the human's phrase is now we're cooking with gas? Wood, Marcus corrected automatically. We're cooking with wood. Gas is for, well, let's not get into that debate here. We've got enough potential diplomatic incidents to manage. The summit's success led to an unexpected but perhaps inevitable development: the establishment of the first interstellar barbecue competition circuit. The inaugural event was scheduled to take place on a specially constructed space station, designed with multiple atmospheric zones to accommodate various species requirements. The rulebook is now over 2,000 pages long, Katix noted with obvious pride. We had to account for everything from traditional Earth techniques to plasma-assisted smoking methods and quantum flavor enhancement. Just wait until they get to the section about sauce, Marcus muttered. The Texas versus Kansas City debate nearly caused an interstellar incident. But as Marcus watched representatives from dozens of species comparing techniques, sharing tips, and yes, occasionally arguing about the proper internal temperature for a perfectly done brisket, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Humanity might not have the most advanced technology or the most sophisticated culture, but they had given the galaxy something perhaps more valuable: the art of taking something tough and unpromising and, through patience, skill, and a whole lot of smoke, transforming it into something magnificent. The scent of perfectly smoked meat, and various meat analogs for non-protein consuming species, wafted through the station's carefully regulated atmosphere. Somewhere, a Melodian quartet was performing their interpretation of low and slow in perfect four-part harmony. A group of quantum beings was earnestly discussing the possibility of smoking meat across multiple dimensions simultaneously. And in the center of it all, Katix was patiently explaining to a fascinated group of new enthusiasts why, sometimes, you just had to trust your instincts and feel the fire. You know, Marcus said to no one in particular, when I first started teaching Katix about barbecue, I never imagined it would lead to all this. The universe works in mysterious ways, responded a passing quantum being, briefly manifesting in their dimension, much like the smoke patterns in a well-maintained fire. Marcus couldn't argue with that. He checked his temperature gauge, adjusted his vents slightly, and settled in for another long, pleasant session of tending the fire and watching the smoke rise. After all, whether you were human, Terran, or a collective consciousness of crystalline beings, some things remained constant. Good barbecue couldn't be rushed, and the best things in life took time, patience, and just the right amount of smoke. The inaugural Galactic Barbecue Championships were held on Proxima Station, a massive space facility specifically designed to accommodate the diverse atmospheric and gravitational needs of the competing species. The main competition floor was a marvel of engineering, featuring everything from standard Earth normal gravity zones to anti-gravity cooking areas for species that preferred to smoke their proteins in 3 dimensions simultaneously. The statistical probability of achieving optimal results under these conditions is... Katix's spots flickered through calculating patterns before settling on a concerned purple. Challenging. Marcus adjusted his galaxy's okayest pitmaster apron and grinned at his former student, now fellow competitor. That's the beauty of it. Barbecue isn't about perfect conditions, it's about adapting to what you've got and making it work. The competition had drawn participants from across known space. The quantum beings had constructed what they called a trans-dimensional smoke chamber that supposedly aged the meat across multiple timelines simultaneously. The Hive Mind Collective had entered as a single competitor, despite being composed of over 1,000 individual crystalline entities, each monitoring a different aspect of their cook. The Arcturians, having finally mastered the art of not accidentally plasma charging their smokers, had developed a technique they called stellar synthesis smoking, which involved carefully controlled microfusion reactions to maintain perfect temperature control. The Galactic Safety Board had required them to sign 17 different liability waivers. The Melodians have composed an entire symphony about smoke ring formation, Katix observed. their spots swirling with amusement as the musical species nearby hummed complex harmonies while preparing their meat. They claimed the vibrations enhanced protein breakdown patterns. The competition categories had been a subject of intense debate during the planning stages. Traditional Earth-style barbecue was represented, of course, but there were also divisions for alternative protein sources, energy field smoking techniques, and even a controversial quantum uncertainty category, where the meat might or might not actually exist until observed. "Did you see what the Hadraxians brought?" Marcus asked, nodding toward a crystalline structure that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. "They've been growing their own hybrid woods in variable gravity environments. Apparently, it creates some kind of super smoke." "Indeed," Katix replied, their spots shifting to analytical mode. "Early tests suggest the smoke particles exist in a state of quantum superposition until they contact the meat protein structure. Most fascinating." The judging panels were equally diverse, with representatives from various species selected for their expertise in chemical analysis, protein structure evaluation, and what the official rulebook somewhat vaguely termed ineffable qualities assessment. As the competition progressed, the station's atmosphere became a complex mixture of smoke from a dozen worlds, creating patterns that the quantum beings declared reminiscent of the universe's earliest moments of creation. The Melodians had begun an impromptu concert, their harmonies shifting in response to the various smoke signals and temperature fluctuations around them. The Hive Mind Collective's coordinated cooking effort was a sight to behold, with hundreds of crystalline beings moving in perfect synchronization as they maintained their fires and tended their meat. They had developed a technique they called consensus smoking, where each individual member contributed to maintaining the perfect temperature balance. "Your species' method of cooking has evolved in unexpected ways," Katix noted, watching a team of Arcturians carefully calibrate their plasma-enhanced smoker. "I believe we may have strayed somewhat from the traditional techniques." Marcus laughed, checking his own decidedly old-school offset smoker. "Maybe, but you know what? That's kind of the point. Barbecue was never about staying the same. It was always about taking what you had and making it better, finding your own way to perfection." The competition reached its climax with the presentation of what the media had dubbed the ultimate smoke, a collaborative effort between representatives of 12 different species, each contributing their unique techniques and technologies to create something entirely new. The result was a piece of meat, or possibly a quantum probability of meat, no one was entirely sure, that had been simultaneously smoked across 3 dimensions, enhanced by harmonic vibrations, aged through multiple timelines, and finished with a rub containing elements that technically didn't exist in normal space-time. The judges' reactions were recorded for posterity. The Zentaran judges' spots had cycled through colors previously unknown to xenobiologists. The quantum being judge had briefly existed in all possible states of appreciation simultaneously. The human judge had simply sat in silence for several minutes before declaring, "Now that's some proper barbecue." But perhaps the most significant moment came during the award ceremony, when the Galactic Council's representative took the stage to make an unexpected announcement. "In recognition of humanity's contribution to interstellar culture and diplomacy through the art and science of barbecue," the announcement began, "Earth has been designated as the galaxy's first heritage site for thermal-chemical protein enhancement methodologies." Marcus leaned over to Katix and whispered, "They do realize they could have just called it a barbecue heritage site, right?" Katix's spots flickered with amusement. "Some concepts lose something in the translation to formal diplomatic language, though I believe the sentiment remains clear." The ceremony concluded with a display that could only happen at an interstellar barbecue competition, a synchronized performance by the Melodian Barbecue Choir, accompanied by the quantum-harmonized smoke patterns of a dozen different species smokers, all merging into a display that the quantum beings declared bore a striking resemblance to the fundamental structure of reality itself. As the celebration continued around them, Marcus and Katix found a quiet corner to observe the proceedings. The station's vast viewing windows offered a spectacular view of the nearest sun, its light reflecting off the swirling smoke patterns in the competition space. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "when I first showed you how to smoke a brisket, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Katix's spots swirled with what might have been nostalgia. The universe, like a properly smoked piece of meat, has a way of revealing its secrets slowly, over time, with proper patience and attention. That's pretty profound for someone who used to think we were just burning dead animal tissue for pleasure. "We all must start somewhere," Katix replied, their spots twinkling. Though I believe I have graduated from such primitive understanding. After all, I did take third place in the trans-dimensional smoking category. Using a traditional offset smoker, I might add. No quantum uncertainty chamber or plasma enhancement required. Some techniques, Katix agreed, transcend the need for technological advancement. Though I am still convinced that smoking at night produces superior results, despite the lack of scientific evidence to support this theory. Marcus smiled and checked his phone, where a notification reminded him of the dozens of backyard barbecue classes he and Katix were scheduled to teach over the next few months. The list of attendees included representatives from at least 15 different species, all eager to learn the fundamentals of what had become known across the galaxy as the human art of smoke. Ready to head back? He asked. I've got a new technique I want to try out, thinking of calling it the quantum brisket butterfly effect. Katix's spots pulsed with curiosity. Does it involve actual quantum mechanics? Nope, just good old-fashioned fire, smoke, and a little bit of that human magic you still can't quite quantify. Highly illogical, Katix replied, their spots glowing with what could only be described as joy. I look forward to documenting the results. The designation of Earth as a heritage site for culinary arts had far-reaching implications that no one could have predicted. Within 5 years, the planet had become the center of what xenosociologists termed gastro-diplomatic cultural exchange, with dedicated barbecue study facilities appearing on every continent. The Texas Institute of Interstellar Barbecue Sciences had become particularly renowned, its sprawling campus featuring atmospheric domes that replicated conditions from across the galaxy. The sight of Arcturians practicing their plasma control techniques alongside traditional offset smokers had become commonplace enough that local residents barely noticed anymore. The integration of various smoking methodologies has produced unexpected benefits, Katix observed during their weekly review session with Marcus. Their spots shifted through analytical patterns as they examined the latest data. The application of Hydraxian quantum wood principles to traditional Earth techniques has reduced cooking times by 22% while maintaining optimal flavor profiles. Marcus, now serving as the Institute's chief cultural advisor, nodded thoughtfully. The real breakthrough was figuring out how to combine the Melodian's harmonic enhancement with the Hive Mind Collective's consensus monitoring. Turns out music really does make the meat taste better. The Institute had become famous for its innovative research programs, including the controversial Cross-Dimensional Flavor Mapping Initiative and the highly successful Universal Protein Enhancement Protocols. But its most significant contribution to galactic society came from its simplest program, the traditional skills exchange. The program paired master pitmasters from Earth with alien species interested in learning the fundamentals of barbecue. The results had been transformative. Species that had once regarded each other with suspicion or outright hostility found common ground in the simple act of tending a fire and watching smoke patterns. The diplomatic corps has reported a 78% reduction in interspecies conflicts among graduates of the program, Katix noted, their spots glowing with pride. Though I suspect the actual impact cannot be fully quantified through traditional metrics. Marcus smiled, remembering how far they'd come from that first backyard cooking session. Some things can't be measured, my friend. Like how do you quantify the moment when someone first understands the importance of patience? Or the satisfaction of perfectly rendered fat? Indeed, Katix agreed, their spots shifting to a contemplative blue. Though I have attempted to create mathematical models for both scenarios, the results were inconclusive. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their newest student, a representative of the recently contacted nebula nomads, a species that existed primarily as clouds of conscious energy. They had expressed interest in barbecue after detecting smoke patterns that reminded them of their native nebulae. Welcome to Earth, Marcus greeted the shimmering form. Ready to learn about the art of smoke? The nebula nomad's response came as a series of elegant energy pulses that the translator rendered as, "We who drift among the stars seek to understand how such primitive thermal application creates patterns that echo the very essence of cosmic formation." Well, Marcus replied, sharing an amused glance with Katix. We usually just call it getting a good fire going. But I like your way of putting it better. The integration of barbecue into galactic culture had led to some interesting linguistic developments. The universal translator now included over 300 variations of the phrase low and slow, each adapted to the specific cultural context of different species. The quantum beings had contributed an entirely new vocabulary for describing smoke patterns in 11 dimensions, though most practitioners stuck to the traditional looks-about-right method of assessment. Research papers from the Institute had become some of the most cited works in galactic academic circles. KTX's original study, now expanded into a multi-volume series, had spawned an entire field of academic inquiry. The latest edition included chapters on temporal aspects of smoke ring formation and the role of human intuition in transcendent protein enhancement. But perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected quarter. The Galactic Council's long-term cultural impact assessment had revealed something remarkable. Species that adopted barbecue techniques showed marked improvements in patience, cooperative behavior, and most surprisingly, creative problem-solving abilities. The act of maintaining a consistent temperature over extended periods appears to enhance neuroplasticity, KTX explained during their presentation to the Council. The requirement to adapt to changing conditions while maintaining fundamental principles creates cognitive patterns that extend beyond the immediate task. In other words, Marcus added, seeing some confused expressions among the Council members, learning barbecue teaches you how to think better. Plus, it's pretty hard to stay mad at someone when you're sharing good food. The Council's response was to establish what became known as the Galactic Barbecue Exchange Program. The initiative funded the construction of barbecue education centers across known space, each designed to preserve and teach traditional Earth techniques while incorporating local innovations. Back at the Institute, Marcus and KTX found themselves at the center of an expanding universe of smoke and fire. Their weekly cooking sessions had become legendary, attracting students and observers from across the galaxy. The sight of a traditional Earth smoker surrounded by beings of various forms, crystalline, energy-based, multidimensional, had become a symbol of interstellar cooperation. "I've been analyzing our progress," KTX said one evening, their spots shifting through patterns that indicated deep satisfaction. "The database now contains over 10 million documented smoking sessions from 57 different species. The pattern recognition algorithms have identified 742 distinct approaches to temperature control and 3,000 variations on wood selection criteria. And how many of those methods actually produce better results than just following your instincts and paying attention to the fire?" Marcus asked with a knowing smile. KTX's spots flickered in what might have been embarrassment. "The data remains inconclusive, though I must admit, my own best results have come from what you term feeling it out." The Nebula Nomad student, still shimmering nearby, pulsed with what the translator suggested was comprehension. "The patterns within patterns, the dance of heat and time, it mirrors the birth of stars themselves." "Now you're getting it," Marcus approved. "Though maybe let's hold off on the actual star birth temperatures. We're going for done, not nuclear fusion." As the evening deepened, more students arrived for their regular session. The Melodians began their traditional smoking songs, their harmonies interweaving with the quantum probability waves of the more exotic smoking methods. The Hive Mind Collective maintained their perfect temperature curves while engaging in philosophical discussions about the nature of perfect bark formation. KTX, monitoring it all with their usual scientific precision, turned to Marcus with spots glowing in that now familiar golden hue. "We have created something remarkable here, my friend. Something that transcends mere protein enhancement methodology." Marcus nodded, adjusting his vents with the practiced ease of years of experience. "We sure have. Though you know what's really remarkable?" "What is that?" "After all these years, all this research, all these technological advances, nothing still beats a simple piece of meat, cooked low and slow, with nothing but wood, fire, and time." KTX's spots pulsed with agreement. "A fundamentally correct observation, though perhaps we should not mention that conclusion in my next research paper." "Probably for the best," Marcus agreed. "Now, who's ready to learn about the most important scientific principle in barbecue?" The assembled students leaned forward eagerly, their various sensory organs focused intently on the smoker. "The principle," Marcus continued with a grin, "that no matter how many times you check it, the meat ain't done till it's done." And as the smoke rose into the gathering darkness, carrying with it the accumulated wisdom of countless worlds, the universe seemed just a little bit smaller, a little bit friendlier, and a whole lot more delicious. The end.